Torres from Spol University in Ecuador. I will be presenting the work of visualizing authorship and contribution of collective writing in learning environments. I will be talking the structure of my presentation about the motivation of the work, some related work of the topic, and our proposed approach, some of the results and limitations of the current work, and outline some conclusions. So collective writing is a new wave in recent years for the students to do work in groups, right? Using some of the platforms that are available like Office or Google Docs or even Wikipedia. But there are some issues that we want to address for this type of works, like is the faculty members' workload, that is the current work that professors have when reviewing the tasks assigned to the students. So we conducted a survey for a group of professors in our department, and we found that there is a variation in the planned hours in the weekly distribution, and some of them had to actually assign a lot more time that was planned for the task of grading tasks. So it actually affects these professors for other more crucial or important tasks like doing research tasks. And also from the data that we had, that we collected, we find that some of the students in this kind of collaborative work, most of a great percentage of the students only make a small contribution to the actual writing of the documents. So around 70% just contribute to the 10% of the documents. So some of the related works has been proposed back to 2007 and before, even for an open platform like Wikipedia, starting with metrics like counting the number of edits, and we have been having new research to do a more detailed, to have more detailed metrics like, for example, counting the number of works in this versioning documents. The particularity of these documents is that they have a versioning, so it's a little more complicated to know which work or sentence each student contributed, because it can be changed through time. And a recent work, for example, tried to analyze that aspect, visualizing a temporal analysis, doing a seismic visualization. So this is closely related to our work. It's a kind of visualization. But we are most focused on the trying to provide the professors with a way to automate the grading of the writings. So we focus on doing beside the quantitative analysis, qualitative analysis of the documents. So this is the general architecture of the system and the components of the system, like is the server and web application, and we try or the system can read several types of documents. And we provide a way to read the documents through an intermediate format based on the versioning, Wikipedia versioning of the documents. So in that way we can store there the information that we get from Google or Microsoft Word APIs, so we can store in that format in our repository, and then we can perform a quantitative analysis based on previous work using the K-partit graph for having the revisions. Each tree is a revision, and it has a node for the paragraphs and the sentences, and to the lowest level the tokens. So it has a reference to when was created each token and who was the author of the token. And our focus on our work is the qualitative analysis, and here we propose some metrics to give a insights of the quality of the document by doing topic extractions, using non-matrix factorization through the paragraphs, and also extracting two more features like trying to detect a reflective writing in the document. So we rely in these two tasks, reflective writing and ontology learning, basically on word embeddings. In this case, we use fast text for doing that. And then we capture those two metrics and we calculate the contribution of the students for each of the terms, qualitative and quantitative. And each term has a factor which is alpha for the quantitative results and the 1 minus alpha for the qualitative metrics. And then we integrate that or provide that information to an application. So we extended the work of WikiHue to decouple from the Wikipedia and instead make it a standalone application to load the text of the data, the editor list, which is the student list, and then the lower graph is the semantics of the quality analysis of the data. So each of the topics and each of the other metrics that are qualitative. So we tested, we performed some experiments with a small data sets in our department that the users, students that use Google Docs. So we collected some documents. We have here some metrics about the data sets. Although we have some percentage of users of documents that only are only one author actually did all the work, but we still consider that for the quality analysis. And then we did some annotations to each of the metrics manually performed by some research assistancies and with the guidelines of professors. So we tested actually with that, trying to predict those informations, how we approach to the gold standard with the guideline of professors, the system, and also we asked some other assistants to do the revision. Then we performed the ranking with the measuring the comparing several methods to which our method, which is the WCM, weighted contribution measurement, and we also tested the alpha evaluation, which is the weight in each of the metrics. So we calculated the cumulative mean error. So we had some limitation in this work, that this is a work in progress. There is some restriction with the APIs, especially when the students are writing to the same time, which is the case of Google or Microsoft documents. We have also not considered other types of data other than text. And the data size is still small, even we relied on word embeddings for analysis of the qualitative metrics. So we provide, or we extend our contribution in this work. Basically, we extend a work of a previous work for the web interface and provide an additional information of quality metrics, focus on semantic analysis. And we found that it improves comparing with just when we do just quantitative analysis. So it's a small improvement, but it still has a lot of room for improvement. So, and in future work, we will try to validate also the structure of the document, and when the professor asks for the document having a specific sections, which is important in the grading of the writing, and some evaluations also for the qualitative metrics with different interfaces. So we also consider asking the students actually to use and test tool. And also measures the impact of that in the workload of the professors. Thank you.
Any question from the audience? Maybe I'll start with a question. So I teach a big class, a lot of group projects, and often students working in teams of 4 to 6 students, often they say they benefit a lot from peer feedback. So one student knowing how the contribution or the amount of contribution, or usefulness of contribution relative to his or her teammates. So do you see this tool might be helpful in providing peer feedback, like in a group setting, or would it more be for a tool for the faculty members or like instructors?
Yeah, that's a question that we actually trying to figure out, because if we give that to the students, they may want to manipulate the system to make equal contributions despite not working in the same.
Yes, other questions from the audience? Okay, I have another question. So you use word embedding, like when you're doing the quality or the analysis. Was that, did the user have any question about that? Oh, how do you come up with the embedding? Is it a reliable measure? Are there any discussion about the choices and how they may or may not be able to interpret the numbers? Or maybe, well, okay, currently I don't have any tools, so any tools you have is great.
We choose the specific embeddings because it's based on Wikipedia documents, and actually provides a version for Spanish documents. So we think that this will be it gives us a good estimate, and actually a majority of the words were present in embeddings for our experiment.
That's great. Any other questions? Okay, if not, let's thank Johnny again. Thank you.